Greetings, my lovelies. This is Blake here, and welcome to my review of The Hateful Eight, Quentin Tarantino's newest movie starring Samuel L. Jackson, Kurt Russell, Michael Madsen, Tim Roth, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and a bunch of other very familiar faces. So, before I start talking about this movie, I really wanted to briefly discuss my review of Django Unchained. Even though I gave it a positive review, I feel like I came across as a bit too negative. Even though back then I thought it was a good movie, and I actually enjoyed it a lot more upon my second viewing of it. But I think the main reason I seemed very caustic is that I have a certain level of expectation for all of Quentin Tarantino's films, and when they are anything short of great, I feel disappointed, and I'm going to latch on to that disappointment. So I would actually say that I'm being very unreasonable. I shouldn't expect 4 out of 4 stars for all of his projects. But I bring this up because I kind of feel like the opposite has happened with The Hateful Eight. It seems like this movie has polarized audiences to an extent, and even the fans seem a bit guarded. And I'm the total opposite because I actually love this movie. I really had a blast watching it. But I just kind of wonder if it's because of the total opposite issue where, because everybody seemed a little disappointed, I was gearing myself up for that same disappointment, so therefore my expectations weren't quite as unreasonable, and therefore I was pleasantly surprised when I enthusiastically embraced almost everything this movie had to offer. Talking about it is going to be a little complicated, though, because certain points I feel like I can explain very clearly, but other points I'm not entirely sure how to put into words quite yet. One thing I really liked about The Hateful Eight, and why I believe it resonated more strongly with me than some of Tarantino's previous movies, such as Django Unchained and maybe even Inglourious Basterds, is that it doesn't seem to be relying so much on referencing or paying homage to past works. Tarantino loves doing that, and it actually is usually very fun watching. Kill Bill is one of my favorite Tarantino movies, and all that is pretty much just one reference after another. However, I kind of feel like I'd like to see Tarantino go back towards, making films like Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs, where, yeah, there are definitely going to be homages there, but for the most part, they are their own entities. The Hateful Eight is referencing a lot of stuff, and I've heard of what Tarantino has said are his inspirations, but they are very, very different from the things that he is referencing. And to me, this just feels much more like a true original film because I wasn't constantly being reminded of the past. So that's one of the aspects that really jumped out at me and was part of the reason why I liked it. Now, granted, there are a few of his the movies or TV shows that he said were major inspirations for him that I'm just not very familiar with, and that might be the only reason why I feel this way. Before watching this movie, I was actually reading through quite a few reviews, making sure to avoid any with potential spoilers, and it seemed like the general consensus was The Hateful Eight is the most Tarantino-ish of all of Tarantino's films to come out. And what they're referring to is the style of dialogue and the level of violence. And this, believe it or not, is not always used as a praise. Some people felt that the Tarantinoisms really did add to the movie and make it just as cool as the rest. Others felt that they just did not belong in this narrative and hurt the movie as a whole. But I actually disagree with the claim entirely. I believe that The Hateful Eight is the least Tarantino-ish of Tarantino's movies to come out. And the reason why I feel this way, like when you look at the style of dialogue, in all of Tarantino's films up until now, the lines have been designed to be very quotable. Something about them has this really endearing flavor that makes them jump out of the screen and make just the right connection with the individual audience member which makes them want to quote the movie as much as possible. And even if the movie fades from their memory, usually the dialogue won't. However, with the Hateful Eight, I believe that the dialogue's not really intended to be cool, even though there's definitely great lines on display here. I think the dialogue is still really, really good. It kept me interested from beginning to end. But the context is usually so unsettling and disturbing that I just don't see people wanting to quote it as much. But that's perfect, because this film is really trying to emphasize its cold, bleak, claustrophobic atmosphere. And the audience is supposed to be just as uncomfortable as many of these characters are. And if the dialogue was intended to be more iconic and quotable, it may have distracted the audience from the film's intended goals. So, like I said, I believe the dialogue is still great, maybe just as great as all of his other films, but it's not designed to be as quotable, even though a few lines will probably be very popular anyway. I, for one, have to resist the urge to say Black Dingus all the time. Some of the stuff that comes out of Samuel L. Jackson's mouth in this movie is absurd to the point of almost being silly, but I seriously don't think that anybody else could have pulled this role off, because Samuel L. Jackson's conviction and his intensity when delivering these lines just makes you have to take him seriously. And that takes just a lot of charisma. That takes a true talent that you just don't see very often in any films these days. I'm going to talk about the level of violence later, but for now, let me finish discussing the characters. I thought the character writing was excellent. I liked how throughout the duration of this film, you quickly get a grasp of these characters, who they are, what their strengths and weaknesses are. I like how they could have all been the heroes of their own stories, but they also could have all been the villains of their own stories. So, for example, take the Confederate, played by Bruce Dern. He's a racist bastard who apparently was guilty of some serious war crimes during the Civil War. So we're supposed to hate him and think of him as a villain. However, at the same time, he's only here because he wants to find closure with his son who went missing some time ago. And when he talks about it, there's enough sincere emotion to where you do kind of feel bad for him. Every character is kind of like that. Certain aspects of them that you find admirable, but at the same time, they do such deplorable shit. Like Kurt Russell's character, he has his values and he sticks to them, even when it's very inconvenient. However, he's also beating the crap out of this woman, who you can't completely sympathize with, because you could tell that this woman's kind of a psycho in her own right. But that kind of stuff just made everybody a little bit more unpredictable, that you don't know what they're going to do by the end of the movie. Will they find redemption or will they find damnation? How low are they willing to go? How monstrous can they become? Or will they turn out to be a lot more heroic than we initially realized? That is just another reason why I found this narrative so compelling. And I thought everybody had the right amount of screen time. All these characters were fleshed out just as well as they needed to be. You learn so much about them. You see their strengths, their weaknesses. They all seem to be... They have something to offer to this story. And even though you might complain that certain characters did not have as much screen time as others, like Michael Madsen's character, for example, has maybe 2 or 3 big scenes, and the rest of the time he's just sort of there. However, I thought that worked because the character is supposed to be shrouded in mystery, and if they had shown more of him, it may have disrupted that aura that the filmmakers were obviously building up around him. I liked how there's a lot of different alternate character interpretations to be seen here. Is so-and-so lying when he said this? Or were they telling the truth? People are going to be debating about certain events within this movie quite some time. And even though the important questions are answered, I liked how the little tidbits here that just heighten the experience so more are left vague enough to where you have to make your own decision, really, based on what you perceive to be the truth or a lie. There is no concrete answer to a lot of the stuff that happens, and I thought that was really cool too. Tarantino's direction is great. I thought the cinematography was awesome. I thought the editing was great. Once again, they're all building up this slow burn tension, this claustrophobic atmosphere, and it worked. I felt everything that Tarantino wanted me to feel. Now, a lot of people are going to struggle with the pacing because, like I said, slow burn, I have to emphasize the slow. I was never bored. In fact, at one point I had to pee, and I was going to go thinking that maybe I was not even halfway through, and it turned out that we had already reached the 2-hour mark. It's not an explosive movie. Much of it is dialogue oriented. Much of it is just wide shots of something, of the entire landscape. And yeah, some of the modern audiences might find it to be a little tedious. I did not. I was totally engrossed in the experience. I loved the score. Ennio Morricone, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I could be wrong. He actually composed some original music for this, and I thought it was great. It was, even though this is a Western, it was a very horror-like score, which is funny because I've always felt that Morricone never really excelled when it came to doing horror music. I did like the theme, but this was, I think, one of his best tracks to date. It was perfectly foreboding. It really just kind of put you on edge and gave you a taste of what to expect from that very first shot of the Jesus the big crucifix covered in snow sticking out. It's very moody, and the music just works perfectly with it, and I found the score to be just as chilling as everything else. And when it comes to the violence, I did not take any issue with it like a lot of people did, primarily because Tarantino actually seemed somewhat reserved. Like, there were a few shots that could have been a lot gorier, but he actually held back. It's incredibly violent, but it never really affected the tone. I thought it worked perfectly fine within the context of this narrative. And it wasn't as explosive as I thought it would be. There isn't really a whole lot of action. In fact, when it comes to the actual action during the third act, it's really just a standoff. People aiming guns at each other and talking. I was expecting, just based off the reviews, like there would be some sort of major horse chase scene or something like that, or even like a Django Unchained bloodbath. There's nothing like that. If I did have any issue with this movie, it's that I don't think they really knew how to end it. I had heard that Tarantino changed the ending after the script was leaked, but the final moments of this movie seem to drag a little bit more, and it was like, okay, that was a little unnecessary, but all right. Maybe I'll change my mind over time. I just have to watch it again. But all in all, I thought The Hateful Eight was an awesome experience. A very unsettling movie that's probably going to be on my best of list for this year. Not everybody seems quite as enthusiastic as I am, but I still strongly recommend that you watch it in theaters, as long as you have a stomach for this kind of thing. If you don't like Tarantino's other films, then I at the most just wait till it comes out on DVD. But for the most part, I think you should support this film in theaters. I did not do a written review of this, but I did do a written review of the original that's not technically the original, but the 1931 Frankenstein. And I'm planning on getting my best of list up within the next few days, so keep an eye out for that. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys later.